All right, good afternoon everybody, it's Jay again, and I thought I would do this video to hopefully save some trees in the valley and hopefully save a little bit of heartache and trouble for you guys, and maybe make it a little bit easier on you guys to grow things if you know some of the problems of what's going on with your tree and why it's struggling. If you know why and how to correct those problems, well then it's a lot easier to garden here and you won't give up as easily when you run into some of these problems. So what I did today is I rounded up a list of 10 different ways or 10 different things that will show you that your fruit tree is either struggling or dying. And I can almost guarantee you that 9 out of 10 of you guys will find this video useful when you go out and you look at one of your fruit trees that's struggling, because it's probably going to have at least one of these issues, if not several of these issues stacked on top of each other, which of course then really creates a problem for a tree, especially a young fruit tree, guys. Let me point that out. The older the tree gets, the better off it's going to handle Arizona and Arizona full sun. When you hear about a tree being a full sun tree, that doesn't necessarily mean that right out of the bat, as soon as it's a little baby tree, that you can plant that out in the full sun right out in the yard and expect it to do well. A lot of trees need to get some age on them before they go out into the full sun. Otherwise, they're going to have problems and get sunburnt, and basically one of the problems that I'm going to have on this list for you guys. So I'm hoping this list will be helpful for you guys, because these are problems that I've seen as far as fruit trees struggling. And I'll tell you what, we've just had a heat wave come through Arizona like you wouldn't believe. I think it's kind of going through everywhere in the nation, and these are some things to look out for, and basically will tell you what's going on with either the heat or the drought of the tree. So I'm going to start with number one. I'm going to start with this one, and number one on the list is solar bleaching. And solar bleaching happens quite often with young citrus in the full sun, whether it be Arizona or Vegas or wherever the sun is extremely harsh. You'll get a condition, especially on young citrus, called solar bleaching, and you can see it on the tops of all these leaves here. You can kind of see that they're not sunburnt yet, they're not crispy brown. We'll go over sunburnt leaves here in a moment, but they're getting there. They're bleached out from the sun. So really the best way to think about this is if you put colored clothes on a hanger and hung them outside, how long would it take before the color started to bleach out of those? So that is what's happening with this citrus. And I more or less created some conditions for you guys to see, because I try to keep these as healthy as I can. So I picked out about as bad examples as I have here, but I'm sure some of your guys are going to look a lot worse. And I'm hoping this picks up on the camera, but you can see it, the solar bleaching there on the edging of the leaves and the top of the leaves, and where the sun is striking the most. In fact, there are some green leaves, and the darker green leaves will be those that are shaded by the upper leaves. And basically this happens to young citrus, guys. And I'll tell you, this wouldn't be so bad on this tree if I had have caught and thinned all of the fruit off of this, which I'm going to do today, which will definitely help out this tree. So you can see that this thing has fruit all over it, right? A bunch of little fruit. And the tree is too small to carry this fruit or even have fruit. So I'm going to cut the fruit off of this one. And I may put this one in the shade for just a little bit, and that's what'll save this tree. So if it was planted, you guys would have to put a little shade structure on it, especially if you're going to leave that fruit. This is the fault of the fruit. It's the fault of being too small of a tree with fruit on it in the full sun. If I take all the fruit off of this thing will green up and sprout back to life. But a lot of that energy is now going into the fruit, and also he can't refoliate because he has all that fruit on it, and he needs a bunch of new branches to kind of fill him back in, so he'll stop doing this solar bleaching. So the fix on this one is that I'm going to do is take off the fruit. All right, guys, so number 2 on the list here is yellow drooping leaves. And you'll see this happen on a lot of stone fruit, and you'll see it especially start to happen to a lot of the older leaves, a lot of the spring leaves that are a lot bigger. So those are going to be the ones that you see affected the most. And as you see, I walk around this tree, you can see that some of the leaves are green, but some of them are not. They're starting to turn yellow. And these are going to fall off. There's really no way to save these leaves. Well, knowing that these leaves are going to fall off, well, then what leaves are going to be on it to protect the tree and the trunk? Well, there won't be any. So what happened with this tree, or what's going on with this tree? Well, this one was a simple one to create. I unplugged the water from this one for about a week. So I starved this one from water so that you guys could see what would happen as the tree more or less starts collapsing. Now, is it death to this tree? No, absolutely not. All I had to do was put the water back onto it, hook it back up, rehydrate it, slide it back here where it's just a little bit shadier, and this one will defoliate, lose all these leaves, but it will put on a brand new set of leaves as long as you catch it and give it water. Now, what happens to a lot of people is they think that they've overwatered it. They think, oh my God, all these leaves are turning yellow. I must be overwatering the tree. So they further underwater the tree, which of course then is collapse and death of the tree, because you need leaves on the tree to protect the stems and the trunks of the tree, as I will show you later on another one here. So this one is from not enough water. This is from being water starved. That's what I did to this one. And as you can see by the ones around it, they are not that way because they have had water. But this one was a purposeful little test. So I unplugged this one so you guys could see what would happen. So no, this tree is not dead. This will refoliate, and this will actually refoliate really, really well and be a beautiful, beautiful tree out here. So that is number 2. All right, so number 3 is cupping of the leaves. And we call this Taco Tuesday down here. So see how these leaves have curled up like a taco on this citrus? Let me see if I can pan up so you guys can see some more. See how they've cupped inward and rolled up like that? That's because we cut the water off this one too. So you guys could see what this would look like. He's drying out basically. The way he's saving himself from the sun and from losing moisture to atmosphere is he's curling these leaves up so that he shades them and protects what little water is left in this plant. So when you see something like this happening, especially when it has so much fruit on it, this thing is just covered. This thing is just covered with fruit. So now it's being double taxed. It's being taxed by trying to put water in the fruit, but then we starved it from water. So now this one can be fixed. All it has to be done is rehydrated. So we would put this on a nice slow drink, and we're gonna give it water more often just to get it back to health again. So we're gonna water this one probably once every other day for the next couple weeks. And then this plant will look absolutely beautiful and stunning like the rest of the citrus are around here. So this one is an easy fix. Lots of water. Okay, so number 4 on the list is yellow dropping leaves. And I'll tell you what, star fruit and mangoes are both notorious for this. And a lot of other fruit trees are, but I'll show you examples on these guys. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is dying on these. This is just an example of these trees leaf cycling because they're never really happy with the leaves that they have, it seems like. So it always seems like they are putting on brand new leaves. And this one's flowering, but it will not set these fruit because it is too hot. It'll set these in the fall. Even though it is blooming right now, it's not going to set these. So star fruit and mango trees, I'm glad I have them side by side here because there's good examples on both of these. And actually, this one just went through a leaf cycle, and it has a few left of those old leaves. You can see back there is a yellow one there, and you can see over here is another yellow one. So they're going to turn completely yellow like that, and then they're going to cycle off the tree, and then of course you're going to get blooms, and you're going to get new growth. But same over here on the mango. Let me show you this real quick. So this is one of its last leaves to go, so I'm glad I caught this one. So this would normally be full of these leaves. He's already dropped them all, but this one. So just flick this one here. Bink, so see, he's gone because he was getting ready to flush. He was getting ready to put on a brand new cycle of leaves here. This one's actually got some nice mangoes on him. Her. Coming along nicely. But that is a sign. There's another one right there. There is a sign. See this leaf? That is a sign that it is putting on new growth in the case of mainly tropical. So you got your mangoes and you have your star fruit. Okay, so that is not exactly showing you that they're dying, but if you cut them off from water because you think you're overwatering them, then they will die because they were ready to put on this brand new flush of growth for you, and you cut the water off because you think you were overwatering them. Let's just put it this way. I don't think you can overwater these star fruit or these mango trees. I mean, they all seem to love it. It's pretty green in there. So they do like the water. All right, guys, that was number 4. Okay, so number 5 is burnt leaves. And as you can tell by the jumbo size of these mulberry leaves, these things aren't small, pretty good sized leaves. You can tell that these won't necessarily like being in the full sun. So this is on the shade side of this Shangri-La mulberry. And wow, what a difference. Like, look at these jumbo. Holy moly. Look at these guys. Look at the size of these leaves on the back side here that's being protected on the back side of this tropical mulberry. And then as we go to the front here, where it gets some more of that heat and shade, or I'm sorry, sun, because I take this tarp down sometimes, you can see that they'll burn. Even a mulberry, they'll burn crispy. Crispy crunchity, right? And why does this happen then? Or why does it have some burnt leaves and then some of it looks so good? Well, in this particular case, I've got this shade screen here, and I put it up sometimes and I have it down sometimes. So it gets used to being behind it and growing the nice big giant leaves. And then when I take down the shade, well, then it burns. You can see that those areas that get exposed to the sun, they just get burnt crispy. And then this leaf develops a tougher leaf. This one almost feels like leather, whereas the ones back there on the same tree, they feel like silk. I mean, they're very smooth. So it will adapt, obviously, as it grows taller. And I leave these burnt leaves on here for 2 reasons. One is they're still protecting some of the leaf below it. They're still protecting. So if you take this leaf off, well, then this one's going to burn, and then this one's going to burn, then this one's going to burn, this one's going to burn. So you just leave it. And then the other thing is it tells the tree that it's burning and it needs to toughen up the leaves or put on more leaves or branches in that area. So then you can notice that somewhere it gets burnt, like this leaf, this one back here is a perfect example. if I can reach it. Let's see here. This one's burnt to a crisp. But then as we go up, he starts to put on tougher and tougher leaves, and actually all new growth now that has adapted past that burning stage. So now he will grow up there and shade the part down below that he knew was burning. So like the trees basically know what is burning, and they can do what they need to do to protect themselves. All right, guys, we are to number 6. So number 6 on the list is Drooping. So Drooping is pretty obvious, I would hope, by this example of this apple tree here as compared to the apple trees that are right next to it. You can see that these guys are all upright and fully supported like they're supposed to be. So what happens when we see drooping like this in this example of this apple that is next to all these other apples? So this could happen for a variety of reasons. One of them being that it doesn't have enough water. The second being it's a newer plant, or a plant that hasn't been in your yard very long, and you put it out more in the full sun. It's going to look a little bit more like this. And then the other reason for this happening is just the temperature. So if it's an apple tree and you got it in an area, it can be any tree, guys, not just an apple tree, but you got it in an area that maybe just gets a little bit hotter than the rest of the plants, well, then it's going to look like this during the day. But usually by either giving it a drink of water or by it cooling off at night, you'll even see a plant like this perk up right away in about 15 minutes. And so that's usually from either water or temperature. And you can tell by doing one of the things, either waiting for night or by watering it and seeing which one of those perks the plant up. If neither one of them does, then there might be another problem with like the root system, or the trunk of the tree might be sunburnt, or a myriad of other reasons. But I think this one's pretty clearly obvious to everybody, is drooping. All right, guys, number 7 on the list. Number 7 is going to be a burnt trunk. And I'll tell you what, this happens to a lot of trees here in Arizona. Not just the native trees, but of course all the fruit trees that we try to plant. And probably the worst thing that you could ever really do is let the trunk be exposed to the sun here, because it's going to burn the trunk of the tree. So that is exactly what's going on with this one. So this is a silk floss tree that I have in my yard, and you can see here that the part that gets the afternoon sun got burnt pretty bad. Now, it didn't get burnt so bad to the point where it blistered and peeled off, which is good, because then I would have had a big damage spot on this. Now, that is not bark that is forming right there. That is basically just a callus that it has formed so that it doesn't burn, and it will shed off that callus because I now have this trunk of this tree shaded and it is not in the sun anymore. And you can see that it is healing itself actually by the green. Do you see those really dark green striations that flow through that callus? Well, you can see that it's already replacing all this tissue, and it really does heal fast on this particular tree. You can see all that green that's coming back into the center there. It's like blood vessels. It's really kind of neat to watch. So you can actually see it's healing itself. But as we come around here to the side that is not in the sun, and you can see it's a completely different story, completely different tree. I mean, this thing looks really really wicked with these spikes, but you can see that there's not any burning. And this actually looks like something out of Mario Brothers, actually, with these giant spikes and that green color. So you can see that there's a vast difference between the side that got the sun and this side over here that is shaded. And some of the ones in the back are even bigger because they are not getting any sun. So what would you do in this situation? You've got two options. One would be to trunk wrap it, put a trunk wrapping around this. I don't paint these, so I wouldn't recommend painting this. Or you can put another plant in front of this, as I have done right here with this cypress tree. I put this cypress in front of the trunk of this tree so that it no longer burns. All right, guys, that was number what? Number 7. All right, let's move on to number 8. All right, so number 8 is death from overfruiting. And I know that sounds crazy, but that is an actual thing. So if a plant puts too much energy into its fruit and not maintaining its growth and its health and its ability to protect itself from the sun, well, then it can't. So it will slowly die on off unless you thin all the fruit, or take all the fruit off of it. Now, this generally happens with smaller trees. As you get larger trees, they can handle that extreme fruit load, and it doesn't bother the tree, as you can see by this peach. But this is one that got a little overloaded this year, and I probably should have thinned it at least, but I didn't. And so the way it looks is it just has an overall miserable appearance. Let's just put it that way. Like, all the leaves are kind of drooped down. It's just not a happy camper is really the best way to describe it. Now, the good thing about all the fruit being gone is now it can spend all of its energy now putting that back into new growth. Come on, focus. And saving the tree. So the tree is good to go. It's lost all that fruit before the heat. But if I had left any of this fruit on as we got hotter and hotter, then yes, it would eventually have killed this tree. That's why we like early ripening varieties, guys, here. That's why we like things that end in June. We don't want fruit on these stone fruits in July and August and September. Why? Because not only do you get cooked peaches, but it puts an extreme tax load on this tree to support fruit for that long, because it's in fruiting mode or it's in growing mode. So it's just sitting there with fruit, basically. And so that's why we like early stuff, and we like to wrap it up before the heat, guys. Move on to other fruits like mangoes. Those are coming on. Mangolango. All right, guys, so death from overfruiting. And if this was a smaller tree, it could easily kill the tree. That's why we take the fruit off for at least the first 3 years, so you don't kill the tree, because it's putting all of its energy into the tree. So if you got a little tree and it had a lot of fruit on it and it looks pretty sorry, that's probably why. All right, guys, that was what, number 8. Let's move on to number 9, acclimation death. All right, so death by acclimation. All right, so I like to call this one the smoke and mirrors, because this is exactly what happens. So I bought this plant up at Lowe's or Home Depot, I can't remember, but I bought this one on purpose to kind of show you guys what would happen when you get a plant there and you expect one thing to happen and you get a whole different thing happening and you wonder why that's happening, okay? So I knew this would happen. I purchased this plant from there, and it has these purple leaves on it. Do you see them? How the bottom of these leaves are all purple. So one would think, and the white flowers, So one would think, hey, this is really cool looking. When I buy this, I'm going to bring it home and I'm plant it, and when it grows, it's going to look exactly like this, right? It's going to have the green and purple. But no, as you plant it and it starts to grow, it starts to change colors and it starts to look more green for you. Like, do you see the tip of this branch here? And you see the tip of this branch here. So you see how it's gone from purple from the other day to just green, basically, right? So you would think, well, what is happening to this plant? Like, why does it have this half purple on the bottom and we've got this green tip thing going on at the top here? Well, this is because this is what happens when you buy things that come from somewhere else. So this plant came from California, I would suspect, where it was a lot cooler. Or maybe it was even grown in a greenhouse there, where it was a lot cooler. So it's got this purple leaf like it's supposed to. Then it gets to Arizona, right? And it's here for not more than a couple days. And not only does it start to burn and lose all those leaves, you can see that it's losing a lot of those purple leaves that it came with. And I'll tell you, within a couple days, it's going to lose all of those leaves that it came with, because those are California where it's cooler. Now, those of you that have grown purple basil know this little trick too, where you go and you buy it and it's purple, you plant it in the summertime, it turns green, and you're like, what the heck? Well, it's because it's from the heat, and the heat and the sunlight here cannot support this darker pigment, this dark purple, or the dark purple like on the purple basil. So what it ends up doing in the middle of the summer and in the heat is it ends up turning green, right? So it's like, okay, well, that just shows you that it's not exactly what you're buying is what you're getting. Now, when it cools down in the fall, will this turn purple again? Yes, it will. So all these leaves that are green currently are going to turn purple again when it cools down, okay? So you just need to know to expect something like that might happen when you're buying something from a place that it's not grown locally. So locally grown, I guess, is sort of the tip on this particular case, because if this was grown here locally, well, then you would have known that it was green like this, and you might not have bought it because you liked it for the purple leaves. Now, I knew this was going to happen, once again, because all things purple seem to do that in the middle of the summer, including like the spicy nectar plum. That one will do it too. Purple when it's cool, green when it's hot. But it just shows you guys what to look for. Also, it'll explain to a lot of you what happens when plants lose a lot of these lower leaves, and you're like, hey, what happened? I brought it home from Costco or wherever, and it dumped all these lower leaves, and now it's just got a little bit up here at the top. Well, it's because it's not acclimated, guys. It's not acclimated. So it's going to go through that weird flush where it loses all these leaves and then has to grow all new ones. That is the advantage of having a locally grown plant, because you know exactly what it's going to look like, exactly at the season it's going to be, so that you're not involved in something where you think, hey, it's going to look like this, and then it turns out not to be that thing. But if this was grown here locally, and I had this for a while, this will be all green. So that is number 9, acclimation death. It happens to a lot of plants here. All right, and number 10, the final one on this list, is summer chlorosis, or summer heat. And a lot of you are going to want to blame this one on nutrients and iron deficiencies and pH. And hey, if I put a little bit of chelated iron, that thing will green back up. No, it won't, because this is what certain plants do during the heat. So this is a plum. This is a good example, perfect example of what to expect out of a locally grown tree. Because if you buy a tree like this in the middle of the summer, it may have a little bit of this going on. Now, if we look at the older leaves, the spring leaves, we see that they are green and gigantic, right? So why are these new ones? What's going on with these? Why aren't these green? We need to green these up, right? I guarantee you it's the same thing what's happening over there with the purple color on that plant. So as soon as it cools back down again, just as soon as we cool back down again in the fall, this plant will go back to dark green all on its own without doing anything at all whatsoever. It doesn't need foliar feed. It doesn't need chelated iron. It doesn't need you to dump all this crap on it that you want to dump on it because you feel sorry for it. Okay? You'll be all right in this condition. I'm telling you, this is from the summer heat. You'll see that the growth is a lot smaller. It's veinier. Little tiny leaves. Now, I've seen this happen every single year. This will go dark back green as soon as it cools back down. It'll flood those leaves with green. Now this, you'll see this happening on a lot. Oh, and here's another thing that'll happen. It'll have some of these leaves, and then the fall leaves will be big dark green ones on top of some of these leaves sometimes. So it looks funny. It looks like like a weird dog. But this will green back up again. It happens to a lot of stone fruits, especially ones that don't like the heat in particular. So certain plums, this is going to happen to. It's going to happen to certain peaches. Not a lot, though. It's going to happen to certain apricots and apriums. You'll see a little bit of this going on. You'll see it on apples a lot, especially as we get hotter. It hasn't really happened to them yet, but it will. You'll see it on apples. You'll see it on star fruit for sure. I don't know if this one over here has done any of that yet, but it will. Let's see here. Still pretty green, but I'll find some out here in the heat though. Yep, here we go. Right there. Those leaves. So you think, oh man, I gotta dump some green something on this thing. But you'll notice it's the ones that are all, the sunlight's hitting the most. It's like a perfect pattern of where the sun's striking or where there's heat. So that's what you're gonna get on starfruit. But don't worry, because good old starfruit like to leaf cycle so much that those leaves will not be on there very long. All right, guys, that is long enough of a video. I'm hoping that is a little bit helpful for some of you. I'm gonna add in one more little part here. One more little thing I wanted to point out here, guys, is really water. That'll fix most of the problems. That'll fix usually 90% of the problems that I went over in this video was either water or shade. I mean, we're getting just tons of fruit over here, guys. And now that a lot of these trees are getting older, they're really starting to produce and really pump on the fruit. So that's one, if I can give advice to you guys, one key thing would be water and shade. All right, guys, I'm hoping those are 10 useful tips on how to get good fruit trees and what to do and recognize as far as some of yours that might be either suffering or dying and how to fix them. All right, guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe.